I really wanted to waste the time to talk about this, because I think it is important for you guys to understand the importance of math. You may not like this class, you may not like me, but it is still important for me to kind of emphasize the importance of math in not just programming. You are in this class, it may not be because you're in computer science. Maybe you're in math, maybe you're in some field of engineering. But even all of those are important. Math is important in all of those. If programming is important to your major, math is most likely important to your major as well. Okay, are we kind of doing okay? You guys can definitely disagree with me, but that's just how I see it. All right, so with that all done, we're going to go back to the really boring stuff of subroutines and parameters and stuff like that. Now with this class, we have already talked about all the different types of parameters. There are only two types of parameters. We have by-value parameters, and then we have by-reference parameters. In the analogy of checking out a book from the library, if you use a by-val parameter, you are working on a copy of a book that you check out from the library. You can do whatever you want with the copy of the book, but when you're all done as a subroutine, you have to shred that copy of the book. Nothing happens to the original copy in the library. Is that okay so far? Now, if you're passing by reference, on the other hand, you don't have a copy of the book. You have a little slip of paper that has the call number of the book. Whenever you need to access the book, you go to the library with your call number, and you go to the original book on the shelf and you work on the original item. When you're all done as a subroutine, what do you shred? Not the book from the library, you don't want to do that. It's the little slip of paper with the call number written on it. Okay? That is what you shred. Are we doing okay so far with the concepts of passing by value versus passing by reference? Yep.
When you're passing by reference, when you make a change in the reference in the subroutine, that change, even though the variable is named differently than the variable.
The name has no meaning because a reference refers to the column of the original item. It does not refer to the name of the item. I know in my class notes, before I switch over to use spreadsheets, it refers to the name of the item. But the more appropriate way is to use the column name of that item. Now that we are using spreadsheets.
So, but when you change the variables, if it's passed by reference in a subroutine, it's going to change the value of whatever variable.
Whatever thing it refers to.
Okay.
Yes. That means, if you're using the library analogy, if the instruction is to highlight a particular line on a particular page, and all you have is a call number to the book, the way you do it is you go to the library, use the call number to locate the actual book, flip to the page and highlight that line. So whatever you do to the book, you do it to the original. So the next person, the next subroutine that comes around to check out the same book will see your highlight because that is actually happening to the original item and not a copy that you're dealing with. Now, if you use the same analogy, using the library book checkout analogy, what is a local variable? A by-val parameter is a copy of a book that you check out from the library. A by-reference parameter is a call number, so you have access to the original book in the library. What is a local variable?
Something that exists only for that individual subroutine.
Yes, and that's basically a binder in your backpack. Okay, it does not belong to the library. Only you have access to that particular book. You can do whatever you want with it, but when you're all done, it gets shredded. Okay, scratch paper, basically. So are we okay with those three concepts? Local variables, passing by value, and passing by reference. Okay, so we're not quite done with those concepts because I can combine those concepts in certain ways to make it interesting. And that's what we'll focus on today, is to combine all those concepts and say, well, if I have a local variable and I pass it by reference to a parameter, pass it by reference to a subroutine, and then I do something to it, what is going to happen? And there are many related questions to that. So we'll go ahead and create a folder for today first. Today is 2010-11-02. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead, just have, add 1 as my subroutine, define sub add 1. Passing by reference is my parameter, I'll just call it n. Doesn't really matter what I call it as long as I use it consistently. And, as the name implies, add 1 is just really going to add 1 to it. And define sub. And I have another subroutine here. I'll call this relay, okay, for the lack of a better term. And it's passed by value a particular parameter. We'll call it x here. And we'll just say that this is a relay, which means it is going to invoke add 1, passing x to n. And then in my main subroutine here, I'll go ahead and say invoke relay, and we'll say we use 50 to specify parameter x. And I'll fix the parameter indentation first, and then we'll explain what is going to happen when this algorithm is executed. Okay. Are there any questions about the code itself before we run it? Yep.
On line 8, how is it passing both ways to n? How?
Why not?
Oh, okay. It's invoking the first subroutine.
Yeah, it's invoking add 1, and it's using the parameter x to specify parameter n of the subroutine that I'm calling. Okay? So now the question is, what is this program going to do? I know it's going to add 1 to something, but what is it adding 1 to, and how does that affect the main program itself? That's the question. And we are going to use the same rules and the same ways of doing things as in previous classes. We're not going to introduce new concepts today. There may be clarifications, but there's no new concept introduced. Do we have any global variables in this case? In other words, you look at the names that we use on the left-hand side of assignment statements. Are those all accounted for by parameters, local and local variables? Yes, they are. Okay, we only have one thing here. It is n. N is already known as a by ref parameter. We have another thing here, which is x, but x is also known as a by value parameter already. And the rest of the program does not have anything that involves a name. This x here is not a variable x. This is the name of the parameter of the subroutine that I'm calling. Okay. Now, the need to know the name of the parameter of a subroutine that you're calling is only in this class. When you're in a C class, you don't need to know the names of the parameter. It is only the position that is important. But I don't want to use the position to imply which parameter we are passing what value to, because that can be confusing. This is a lot more clear. We are passing 50 to which parameter? To parameter x. Okay. So now we'll go ahead and figure out what we are going to do with this program. There's nothing to say about the precondition because there are no variables in existence at this point. Now that is important because it is our objective to get rid of global variables altogether. Okay, and this program does not have any global variables at all. The only line that we are going to execute is line 11 because that's the only line that is outside of the definition of a subroutine. And because it is invoking a subroutine, we have to allocate columns. In this case, we need one column for the return line number, which is going to be post because line 11 is the last line of the pseudocode. Okay, that's stuff we should be fairly familiar with at this point. But we also need one more column because subroutine relay requires one parameter. And the parameter has a name of x, and it is passed by value. What am I going to put here in this cell? what am I using to specify the initial value of this by-val parameter?
Question mark?
No.
50.
The expression 50. Now, note that I use the word expression instead of the word constant. That means whatever you specify here can be any expression. It can be an expression this long, can be a constant, can be a single variable, can be anything. Okay? In this case, it is an expression that has a constant, which is just 50. The value of the expression 50 is 50 itself, and that's why parameter x will start with a value of 50. Now, somebody mentioned, question mark or unknown. That only applies to local variables. If a subroutine has a local variable, then the local variable starts with an unknown value. Okay? But a by-val parameter is like a local variable, except it has an initial value specified by the invoke statement. Are we okay so far? So look at a by-val parameter as a local variable with an initial value. When we are done setting up, how to get back and also the space that we need for the parameter, we can continue execution in the subroutine. And the only line that actually does something useful is line 8. So now the question is, what do we do when we execute line 8? It is invoking a subroutine, so we know right away that we have to specify a return line number. In this case, the line that is logically following line 8 is line 9, so that's not a difficult step. The big question is, what do we do with column E? We know that we have to use column E because add1 is a subroutine that has one parameter. So we know that we have to use column E. Yep?
I don't understand why we go from line, I understand line 11 to line 8, because line 8 is the first thing that actually does something, but doesn't line 6 and 7 actually declare the variable and pass the value into the variable? So why don't
No, those are declarations. In other words, line 7 is only a declaration to say that, oh, by the way, x is a by-val parameter. That's all it's saying.
But doesn't it assign the value,
No.
value 52?
No, the action happens on line 11.
Okay.
Yeah. By the time you get to line 7 is nothing more than a way to tell the compiler or Visual Basic or whatever language you're using and say, oh, by the way, if you're using this subroutine, make sure that the invoke statement specifies something for parameter x. That's all it's saying. So that's why there's nothing to do on line 7. There's nothing to do on line 2. They are declarations to say, oh, we have a thing, an object called x. We have an object called n, and this is how it is going to be used.
So line 9 actually is a return. Is not, don't return a value, but it's a return back to the...
Yes,
the original.
that's why there's an action associated with the end of a subroutine.
Okay.
Yep, very good. Okay, so now the question is, what do we say in E, in column E? We are on line 8 right now. We are passing something to n, and this is passed by reference. In other words, what we are doing here is to say, I want parameter n of add1 to be able to refer to parameter x of relay. So we know that this has to be a reference, and I use aka also known as as an alias. So n is going to be an alias of which column?
Column C.
Column C, which is parameter x. Now this is deviating a little bit from the notes that you read in the modules, because in the notes it refers to the name of the variable, which is more confusing. This refers to the column of that thing, which is absolute. Are we doing okay so far? Especially with this particular cell, why we are specifying also known as column C. Yes? Okay, because this is the important concept. Okay, because the rest of the program doesn't really do any